Youth rights. The youth rights movement, also known as youth liberation, seeks to grant the rights to young people that are traditionally reserved for adults due to having reached a specific age or sufficient maturity. This is closely akin to the notion of evolving capacities within the children's rights movement, but the youth rights movement differs from the children's rights movement in that the latter places emphasis on the welfare and protection of children through the actions and decisions of adults, while the youth rights movement seeks to grant youth the liberty to make their own decisions autonomously in the ways adults are permitted. Youth rights have increased over the last century in many countries. The youth rights movement seeks to further increase youth rights, with some advocating intergenerational equity. Codified youth rights constitute one aspect of how youth are treated in society. Other aspects include social questions of how adults see and treat youth, and how open a society is to youth participation. Issues of primary importance to advocates of youth rights are historical perceptions of young people, which they say are oppressive and informed by paternalism, adultism, and ageism in general, as well as fears of children and youth. Several of these perceptions made by society include the assumption that young people are incapable of making crucial decisions and need protecting from their tendency to act impulsively. Youth rights advocates believe those perceptions inform laws throughout society, including voting age, child labor laws, right-to-work laws, curfews, drinking/smoking age, gambling age, age of consent, driving age, youth suffrage, emancipation of minors, minors and abortion, closed adoption, corporal punishment, restrictions on young people that would be considered unacceptable if applied to adults are viewed by youth rights advocates as a form of discrimination. There are specific sets of issues addressing the rights of youth in schools, including zero-tolerance VLAG schools, in loco parentis, and student rights in general. Homeschooling, unschooling, and alternative schools are popular youth rights issues. A long-standing effort within the youth rights movements has focused on civic engagement. There have been a number of historical campaigns to increase youth voting rights by lowering the voting age and the age of candidacy. There are also efforts to get young people elected to prominent positions in local communities, including as members of city councils and as mayors. For example, in the 2011 Raleigh mayoral election, 17-year-old Seth Keel launched a campaign for mayor despite the age requirement of 21. Strategies for gaining youth rights that are frequently utilized by their advocates include developing youth programs and organizations that promote youth activism, youth participation, youth empowerment, youth voice, youth/adult partnerships, intergenerational equity, and civil disobedience between young people and adults. History. First emerging as a distinct movement in the 1930s, youth rights have long been concerned with civil rights and intergenerational equity. Tracing its roots to youth activists during the Great Depression, youth rights has influenced the civil rights movement, opposition to the Vietnam War, and many other movements. Since the advent of the Internet, the youth rights movement has been gaining predominance again. Fallibility and individual differences. Youth rights. Children's rights cover all rights belonging to children. When individuals grow up, they are granted new rights such as voting, consent, and driving, and duties such as criminal responsibility and draft eligibility. There are different minimum limits of age at which youth are, situationally, not independent or deemed legally competent to make certain decisions or take certain actions. Some rights and responsibilities that legally come with age are voting age, age of candidacy, age of consent, age of majority, age of criminal responsibility, drinking age, driving age, legal working age, right to work, student rights, youth suffrage. After youth reach these limits, they are free to vote, buy or consume alcohol beverages, and drive cars, among other acts. Movement. The youth rights movement, also described as youth liberation, is a nascent grassroots movement whose aim is to fight against ageism, and for the civil rights of young people, those under the age of majority, which is 18 in most countries. It is ostensibly an effort to combat pedophobia and ephibophobia. Advocates of youth rights distinguish their movement from the children's rights movement, which they argue advocates changes that are often restrictive towards children and youth, and which they accuse of paternalism, pedophobia, and adultism. They point out distinctions between 1970s youth liberation literature and child rights literature from groups such as the Children's Defense Fund. Organizations in China. International Youth Rights IYR is a student-run youth rights organization in China with regional chapters across the country and abroad. Its aim is to make voices of youth be heard across the world and give opportunities for youths to carry out their own creative solutions to world issues in real life. Organizations in Europe. The European Youth Forum YFJ from Youth Forum Junis is the platform of the National Youth Council and international non-governmental youth organizations in Europe. It strives for youth rights in international institutions. The European Youth Forum works in the fields of youth policy and youth work development. It focuses its work on European youth policy matters, whilst through engagement on the global level it is enhancing the capacities of its members and promoting global interdependence. In its daily work, the European Youth Forum represents the views and opinions of youth organizations in all relevant policy areas and promotes the cross-sectoral nature of youth policy towards a variety of institutions. The principles of equality and sustainable development are mainstreamed in the work of the European Youth Forum. Other international youth rights organizations include Article 12 in Scotland and KRATZA in Germany. In Malta, the voting age has been lowered to 16 in 2018 to vote in national and European Parliament elections. The European Youth Portal is the starting place for the European Union's youth policy, with Erasmus Plus as one of its key initiatives. Organizations in the United States. The National Youth Rights Association is the primary youth rights organization for the youths in the United States, with local chapters across the country. The organization known as Americans for a Society Free from Age Restrictions is also an important organization. The Free Child Project has gained a reputation for interjecting youth rights issues into organizations historically focused on youth development and youth service through their consulting and training activities. The Global Youth Action Network engages young people around the world in advocating for youth rights, and Peacefire provides technology-specific support for youth rights activists. Choose Responsibility and their successor organization, the Amethyst Initiative, founded by Dr. John McCardell, Jr., exists to promote the discussion of the drinking age. Specifically, Choose Responsibility focuses on promoting a legal drinking age of 18, but includes provisions such as education and licensing. The Amethyst Initiative, a collaboration of college presidents and other educators, focuses on discussion and examination of the drinking age, with specific attention paid to the culture of alcohol as it exists on college campuses and the negative impact of the drinking age on alcohol education and responsible drinking. Organizations in India. Young India Foundation YIF is a youth-led youth rights organization in India, based in Gurgaon with regional chapters across India. Its aim is to make voices of youth be heard across India and seek representation for the 60% of India's demographic that is below the age of 25. YIF is also the organization behind the Age of Candidacy campaign to bring down the age when a member of Legislative Assembly or member of Parliament can contest. Prominent individuals. Youth rights as a philosophy and as a movement has been informed and is led by a variety of individuals and institutions across the United States and around the world. In the 1960s and 70s, John Holt, Richard Farson, Paul Goodman, and Neil Postman were regarded authors who spoke out about youth rights throughout society, including education, government, social services, and popular citizenship. Shulamith Firestone also wrote about youth rights issues in the second-wave feminist classic The Dialectic of Sex. Alex Koroknay-Palix has become a vocal youth rights proponent, making regular appearances on television and in newspapers. Mike A. Males is a prominent sociologist and researcher who has published several books regarding the rights of young people across the United States. Robert Epstein is another prominent author who has called for greater rights and responsibilities for youth. Several organizational leaders, including Sarah Fitzclarage of Taking Children Seriously, Bennett Haston of Peacefire, and Adam Fletcher, activist of the Free Child Project, conduct local, national, and international outreach for youth and adults regarding youth rights. Giuseppe Porcaro, during his mandate as Secretary General of the European Youth Forum, edited the second edition of the volume The International Law of Youth Rights, published by Brill Publishers.